Okay, so here we are, episodes 9 and 10 of Luke Cage. The first one, episode 9, is DWYCK, or Do What You Can, Kid. Basically, the running motif throughout a lot of the episode is that Misty is required to see a police staff psychologist, or psychiatrist, or whatever, psychologist, about, her handling with Claire Temple in the previous episode, as it's sort of, like I said, a running motif throughout everything. Basically, it all leads up to Misty admitting that the reason she's so upset is because she lost all her power. Well, basically, she lost her composure when Diamondback held her at gunpoint and took her hostage. It's throwing her off her game. And she's eventually allowed back on the force basically under the direction that she has to bring in Luke Cage. Luke, meanwhile, manages to work his way out of the garbage truck and discovers that he's in New Jersey. As this is happening, Diamondback pays a visit to Shades, who's acting as the new Cottonmouth, basically. Diamondback wasn't too pleased that Cottonmouth died. Basically, Cottonmouth was pretty good at his job, for the most part, and now there's kind of this power vacuum, and Shades just thinks he can slide right in. Well, he's not, and Diamondback is... well, not too sure. So, Shades goes to visit Mariah, who's paying her last respects to Cottonmouth, but he says, basically, look, you need to contact the other crime lords and set up an appointment to start divvying up Cottonmouth's property. There's too much of a power vacuum. No one could just slide right in. It needs to be divvied up, so, yeah, this way everything won't fall apart. And we then return to Luke as he makes his way through New Jersey, and he gets identified by two cops because two police officers who have been instructed to try to find him. They try to bring him down, but Luke has no choice but to fight them off. All of this gets caught on the dashboard cam, which then basically gets leaked to the internet and winds up going viral. Creating even more of a public backlash against Luke Cage. Mariah goes on to make her appointment after this as Luke manages to meet up with Claire at her mother's restaurant. Now, I don't know if that means he made it back into New York City or if Claire's from New Jersey. I don't think it was ever really explained. But Claire, and he sort of explains who Diamondback is he says Diamondback is an old friend, but later denies any idea that the two could be brothers. But Claire has been doing some research on her own, and she's managed to figure out that Dr. Bernstein is the guy behind the Seagate experiment. He's also not dead, but he's not employed at Seagate anymore. So Claire basically takes her mother's car, and they go down to Georgia she and Luke go down to Georgia to visit Bernstein because Luke is still in great pain because the shrapnel is continuing to be buried into his flesh. Basically, the shrapnel is, because Luke's flesh keeps healing, the shrapnel just kind of keeps traveling through, wreaking even more havoc, and then the flesh recovers, but it's still, in there. They can't get it out. Bernstein had some leftover equipment from the experiments. They tried to get some blood, but his wounds are too septic, so they have to draw blood from his throat, and basically Bernstein is forced to sort of try to do a backtrack recreation of the experiment, except his idea is to dip Luke in acid. And basically let the acid sort of burn through enough skin to hopefully allow them to get in and fix everything, get the shrapnel out. They start trying to do this, and Luke starts to go into cardiac arrest, and that's how his part of the episode ends. Meanwhile, Mariah is holding her meeting, which she made through Cologne, who runs the Puerto Rican side. She's meeting with the Haitians, the Jamaicans, I think the Italians are the other ones, and that's sort of it, and the Puerto Ricans. None of the other crime lords are doing it because they talk about the Triad and the Hand not being interested in it because they're dealing with a power vacuum of their own. But as this meeting is going down, Diamondback arrives and he basically kills all but Mr. Cologne. He kills all the other crime lords except for Cologne. And basically he says, no, the power vacuum is... one man can put... I'm going to fill the power vacuum and I'm going to use Mariah as my puppet, basically. And he turns to Mariah and basically says, okay, give me a reason not to kill you. And so she suggests letting the police take down Luke Cage by giving them access to the Judas bullets, the bullets that burrow in and explode. And he says, okay, that's actually a good idea. And that's basically how this all leads into episode 10, Take It Personal. As the experiment is going on, they still can't quite penetrate through Luke's skin to get the shrapnel out. Eventually Claire comes into the idea to boil the acid and see if that, because it turns out it's the heat that's also working just enough to basically weaken it, and it does manage to weaken it enough for Claire and Bernstein to extract all the shrapnel. Luke eventually manages to recover because Claire jury-rigged a defibrillator and dropped it into the vat. Anyway, with Mariah, she meets up with Diamondback at the storage facility. He's made a slightly weaker version of the Judas bullet. Basically, Diamondback rose to power because he harvested all of the alien material, a lot of the alien material from the Chitauri invasion and some of the others too. I can't quite figure out what else he's harvested it from because I think he's talked about vibranium a little bit as well. But like I said, he's made a slightly weaker Judas bullet. It'll still go through, but it's smaller and it can be placed in machine guns, which means basically they don't have to sell the weapons, they can just sell the ammunition. He then goes out in a hoodie and he starts killing cops he's developed a glove that can, basically it's like a shockwave glove. It will kill on impact. He kills a few cops, proclaiming that he's Luke Cage. And word of this gets back to Misty Knight, who sort of points out like who idiotically screams their name as they're killing someone. That would attract attention. You don't want to attract attention to yourself. But again, the police department just wants her to bring in Luke Cage. Anyway, back with Claire and Luke, they're still at Bernstein's. They're kind of going over his computer files. Riva left a flash drive, some of the information on Luke, but it was so encrypted. But Bernstein managed to decrypt it all to make his study, and he discovers Riva making vlogs about Carl Lucas and how she basically pushed him into the program. That the whole idea was the therapy session was to find those who were basically mentally strong, or not so much mentally strong, but in need of help, to break them down to their weakest point, but were still physically strong. And Luke gets angry and he starts destroying the equipment. He basically finds out that it's not so. It does question as to whether or not Riva loved him, but she did aid in his escape and his name change, and she did technically marry him. I mean, that's a pretty long way to go for someone you don't really care about. Basically, Luke smashes Bernstein's equipment. However, later you see Bernstein going through the wreckage of the equipment, and he manages to get the hard drive reactivated. Anyway, Misty, back with Misty, she's identified Willis Diamondback Stryker as her attacker. She investigates further and discovers that a man named Carl Lucas took the fall for possibly was arrested with Willis Stryker and took the fall for him, and realized that this is Luke's real name. And kind of through this, Misty is able to get permission to go after Diamondback. Claire and Luke make a brief visit to the church that Luke's fathers ran. It's in complete disassembly. The building is still there, but the inside is just completely trashed. There's graffiti all over the place. And Luke starts kind of having flashbacks about things and how Willis Stryker's mother was the secretary to Luke's father at the church, and they seem to be getting together a bit at times. And there's one point where he sees kind of an angry confrontation between his mother and Diamondback's mother. And at another point, he remembers Diamondback's mother emerging from his father's office. His father was clearly buttoning up his shirt, and she was all flustered, and her clothes were in disarray. And he pieces together, yes, Diamondback actually is his brother. As this is happening, Mariah has been hosting political rallies. Claire and Luke eventually make it back to, sorry, I'm getting all over the place here. Claire and Luke get back to New York City. As this is happening, Mariah is holding a major kind of political rally to get people to at least arm the police with the Judas bullets. And she also makes a brief Jessica Jones reference about, she talks about Daredevil in Hell's Kitchen, Luke Cage, and then she mentions the girl who broke a man's neck because he was mind controlling her. So yeah, we actually get a Jessica Jones, or second Jessica Jones reference in this. No, maybe our third. Anyway, she calls for the NYPD to be armed with the weapons to take down the real enemy, Luke Cage. This is Luke and Claire arrive in Harlem, and they find about the rally. They get to the rally, and they're trying to lay low, but Luke sees Misty going up to Diamondback's office. He goes up there to provide backup. Misty confronts Diamondback, and Diamondback shoots her. Luke gets there just as Diamondback hits her a couple of times. He starts blocking the bullets, but as a result, he winds up getting spotted and even caught on video. And it's at this point, all hell breaks loose, and the episode ends.
I'll blow this town to smithereens! Time bomb! Try to get up there in time, Spider-Man!
Watch me cut my web, Goblin.
Watch yourself fall, Silk Slinger!
Gotta stop the bombs in time.
If I don't get you, webhead, my diagnosis will!
Holy Hannah!
And you're running out of fluid!
Is this more action than even Spider-Man can handle?
Spider-Man, a video game from Parker Brothers, the ones to beat.
Behind this door, evil yearns to be free. But first, two pieces of a relic must be joined.
They form a key, the Spider Stone.
Now the X-Men must battle to keep the door closed and the evil within.
Apocalypse.
X-Men Evolution, an all-new episode is next, right here on Kids WB.
Okay, we now move to Iron Fist with Episode 9, The Mistress of All Agonies. We open up with a doozy as Harold Meacham emerges from the pond that Ward left him at the end of Episode 7. We then go back to Colleen's dojo where Madame Gao is being held by Danny, Colleen, and Claire. Both the women point out this is kind of stupid as, well, the hand could easily reach this place. They're not really in hiding at all. But at this point, Claire suggests going to Rand Industries and getting hold of some sodium pentothal, aka truth serum, to extract the information they need from Madame Gao. Danny starts trying to head towards Rand Industries, but he bumps into Joy, who explains everything that happened with the Meachams and Danny being ousted and them no longer being in control. So Danny is forced to break into Rand and use an employee who he sort of befriended to get his hands on the sodium pentothal. As this is happening, Madame Gao is back at the dojo and she's taunting both Claire and Colleen. Colleen, after talking to Madame Gao, is becoming physically ill. In fact, she's getting increasingly sick. As this is also happening, an amnesiac Harold is kind of wandering around New York City. He has an encounter at a fire hydrant. He burns his hand on a hot dog stand. At this point, he comes across the Rand Industries headquarters and slowly begins to regain his memory. He manages to contact his assistant at the penthouse, who comes and picks him up, and the assistant explains of the ousting of the Meachams and Danny. As this is happening, Harold bumps into someone who is wearing similar robes to what Danny was wearing when he arrived in New York City. And this person, you follow them a little bit further. You see them kind of commandeering a food truck to use as sort of a base of operations. He's looking for Danny Rand. This is a character known as Davos. Sort of a friend / rival of Danny from Kunlun. Possibly, I think he was also the rival to become the Iron Fist at one point. I'll probably explain a bit more about him in the later episodes. Anyway, Harold is taken back to the penthouse where Ward arrives, and Harold sort of apologizes for failing Ward as a father and says, you know what? You can go. I'll work with Joy instead. And it kind of leaves Ward a little unnerved. We'll get back to him. Anyway, as this is happening, Danny returns to the dojo, and Gao is dosed with the sodium pentothal. She talks about she introduced Danny's parents because Danny's mother was working with the hand, not Danny's father. But it turns out that the truth serum wasn't actually working on her, so she might be lying in this case. But what is true is that it turns out Colleen was poisoned back at the ending fight of episode 8. When they discovered the poison, Colleen was cut. And it's the same poison from, like I said, it's the same poison before. And Danny is forced to call someone who it turns out is Bakudo. And Colleen's sensei, who I talked about earlier as well. And Gao gets really upset and starts trying to warn Danny off. Said, hey, you're walking into a trap. Don't believe this guy. And just before this happens, they actually get attacked by... a bunch of military men kind of break in, and they're pretty sure it's not the hand, because again, this is more of a military maneuver, not martial arts based. But Colleen, Claire, and Danny do manage to defeat everything. Anyway, Ward, kind of concerned about the way Harold Meacham is acting, goes to visit the Triad, and he asks them questions about the hand, and the Triad guy tells a story of his grandfather who made a deal with the hand to never be killed in battle, and he kept getting killed in battle and revived, killed. But each time he came back, more and more of his good nature was vanishing. And eventually the man killed 2 of his children and roasted them on an open spit. So, yeah, Ward tries to kind of go back to defuse everything, but he goes outside to find the police investigating his car because it turns out Harold put heroin on the passenger seat so that they were able to search via probable cause. As this is happening, Joy comes back to the penthouse. Harold sees this on a security camera and lets her in, revealing the truth finally. Anyway, Bakudo arrives. Back at the dojo, Bakudo arrives. Like I said, Gao tries to warn them off, saying, again, don't trust this guy, this is a trap. And of course, Danny doesn't believe her. Bakudo says, look, you're the Iron Fist. You can actually use your ki to heal her and burn the poison out. And so Danny tries that, but it completely exhausts his ki, and he collapses. And Colleen, basically, Bakudo takes Colleen and Danny and Gao from the premises, but they leave Claire behind. And that leads into episode 10, Black Tiger Steals Heart. Danny awakens next to Colleen, who explains what happened, while at the same time, Harold has been explaining everything that happened to Joy, though I think he skips over the part about Ward killing him the second time. And they started plotting to try to retake over Rand again. Danny and Colleen, like I said, are at this academy/monastery that's run by Bakudo. He calls it a safe haven. Bakudo explains again that Danny's ki was completely exhausted, and then he trains them in the art of recharging it. And anyway, Bakudo sort of explains again, this is a safe haven for the lost and directionless. We've taken all sorts of people in. We're helping them. He shows Danny footage of an earlier Iron Fist, and Bakudo explains that, yes, I was being trained. I heard about these immortal weapons that represented the cities of heaven, and I became so fascinated by them. And then I found this footage of an Iron Fist, and I knew that we had to work together Bakudo has taken sort of an anti-corporate stand. He's saying, the businesses and the oligarchs run the world, but you can be our tool. You can help us change the world and make things better. He also says that Gao is in prison and not to worry about her. She's not dead, but they need to figure out the best way to deal with her. And for now, this will work. And he wants Danny to reach his full potential to again save the world from those who want to dominate it. Back with Joy and Harold, they call Danny and he explains what happened, and they try to work on getting Rand back. He mentions Bakudo briefly. And it turns out that Bakudo has tapped Danny's phone. That yes, there is obviously way more that's going on here. And it turns out that Danny kind of goes investigating on his own. He visits Gao in her prison, and Gao says, how do you think they know who I am? You're dealing with the Hand here. And Danny doesn't completely believe her, but he goes to Colleen, and basically Colleen comes clean and says, we are the Hand, but we're not that part of the Hand. We're an offshoot. We're trying to fix the world. We're not trying to take over. We don't do drug dealing. We don't do crime. We're trying to help everyone. But Danny is essentially incensed. He basically accuses, Colleen of being a tool to win him over, to, win his heart and win him over. And Danny basically storms off. And as this is happening, Bakudo is visiting Harold. And he says, look, Gao is no longer in charge of the Hand. I am in charge. I am here. I'm going to say this. We're going to let you live your public life again. We're going to let you take over Rand. And, we're going to work together on fixing these problems. I'm not the intimidate you and, make you do things you don't want to do type. We're going to work together. We're going to benefit each other. Then he continues to explore the safe haven, and he finds this kind of a control room that has been following him, that has been following Colleen, that has been following Harold, it's been following everyone. He realized, at this point, Bakudo confronts him, and they fight. Danny briefly manages to knock Bakudo out, and he starts running in. He starts seeing all of these people, all these security guards start swarming him, and that's when Davos arrives. And he takes on a couple guards and goes, wow, you are really the worst Iron Fist ever. Davos and Danny begin fighting. Bakudo comes back into the fray and stabs Danny in his lower back with the weapon of some kind, and afterwards Danny does not seem to be able to use the Iron Fist. Bakudo explains that Danny's ki has become corrupted and destroyed, so he'll never tap into the Iron Fist again. As this is happening, though, Colleen basically turns against the Hand and opens the gate, allowing Danny and Davos to escape. Morning comes. That night, with Harold briefly, again, he went to the guy who ousted Joy, Danny, and Ward, and basically said, again, he uses the blackmail information. He says, look, I'm not, you're going to blackmail you. I'm not going to tell you to resign. I'm going to tell you to kill yourself, because that's the only way you're going to get through this without sin. And the guy doesn't believe him, so Harold shoots him and makes it look like a suicide. And thus, the next day, Harold does not publicly come back, but basically Harold takes over with Joy as his puppet. But Joy wants no more lies, and then Harold proceeds to lie about, he says, no, that executive did kill himself. Anyway, Davos and Danny are making their way through the streets. Danny is bleeding. Davos said, look, we need to just get you patched up. We need to take you back to Kunlun because you're supposed to be the guardian of the city. You're not supposed to be traveling on your own. And it might be the only way to bring back the Iron Fist. And that's how the episode ends.
Hey, Spidey, isn't Marvel's new Pizzazz magazine fantastic?
Fantastic, but not perfect.
But Pizzazz has the lowdown on Jaws, too. And more Sean Cassidy picks than his mother. It's sensational.
Sensational, but not perfect.
How about Pizzazz's Goofy Guide to TV? It's wild look at sci-fi movies. It's games, puzzles, comics. What could be more perfect?
Me on the cover, not the Hulk.
Pizzazz, the almost perfect new monthly from the off-the-wall gang at Marvel Comics.
They're the ultimate team of superheroes, an elite brigade sworn to fight crimes of mass destruction. They are the Avengers. And if you think you've got what it takes to become one, think again.
You don't just join. The team has to decide.
Ant-Man, fearless team leader and world's foremost biochemist with ability to shrink and grow in size.
The Avengers have saved more lives than you can count.
The Wasp, Ant-Man's wife, special powers, size changeability, winged flight, stinger weapons.
We helped form the Avengers, and don't you forget that.
The Falcon, streetwise superhero from Harlem, whose suit allows him to fly, also able to communicate telepathically with his bird Red Wing.
Nobody blasts my bird.
Hawkeye, acrobatic archer with high-tech arrows.
You want to be one of us, huh? Better guys than you have tried to become an Avenger and failed.
Find out if you've got what it takes when you catch the Avengers. Next Saturday morning with an all-new episode at 10:30, only on Fox Kids.
Okay, so basically we got 4 kind of quiet episodes, sort of quiet before the storm, a lot of character building, I guess I would say. I mean, obviously, Iron Fist at least had some martial arts action interspersed throughout most of it. Not so much in episode 9, but definitely in episode 10 there was a lot of martial arts action, especially towards the end. Luke Cage, I mean, again, there was action in there, but it seemed to be sort of interspersed again, throughout character building moments. There's nice character moments for Misty Knight in Luke Cage, seeing where that kind of goes. Right now, it seems like the enemies are all kind of, I like to say treading water, but they're kind of stuck in place. Basically, all you need to know is Diamondback is a complete nut. He spends half his time quoting the Bible and other times quoting movies. Exactly. It's like, we're supposed to believe that everyone sort of acts intimidating around him, but like, he's so off kilter that you think at some point he's just going to slip up. He's going to have the same thing happen to what happened with Cottonmouth. But like I said, not necessarily bad. I think the villains are sort of treading water. I think the villains are treading water in Iron Fist as well. I mean, the only real initiative I think was Bakudo, and that was about it. And it seems like he got knocked down pretty quickly as well. So yeah, anyway, next episode we finish off for the first seasons of Luke Cage and Iron Fist. So we're covering 6 episodes, not just 4, or not just 2 of each. So yep, 3 episodes of each show. Yep, that's going to be a bit of a journey. Let's see, after that, well, I mean, the next video up after this is going to be the Black Panther review, and then the Deadpool vs. Carnage review. As for the show when I end, obviously, like I said, next week will be the end for Luke Cage and Iron Fist, but the week after that, which is going to be the first week of March, is going to be, we continue on with this Netflix catch-up by starting both The Defenders and The Punisher. And yes, like I said, this does mean we're going to be overlapping into Season 2 of Jessica Jones. Jessica Jones premieres on March 8th, I believe, but it won't be too much of a delay in between that. I won't be covering that alongside Defenders and Punisher, but I'll be right in the middle of Defenders, because Defenders is only at 8 episodes, so we will be through that, at which point we will transition to being Punisher and Jessica Jones, and then when Punisher finishes, it'll be Jessica Jones from there on out. See you all next time. Hey guys, is there a movie you want me to tackle? If it's some stinker like Baywatch or the Emoji Movie or something else? Check out my Patreon at Sleepy Time for Cat Productions. See how you can make that happen.